.net at Copenhagen, the greatest show on earth, which has now got only, 4 days to go, depending when it finally comes to a conclusion. Next up is Nelson Muffuh. I have to read this because I was rushing back, and I know you've got to go off to another meeting. The negotiations are reaching a rather heated stage now, so nobody wants to leave either the meetings or just outside the meetings in case they miss something. And you are the Senior Climate Change Advocacy Coordinator for Christian Aid. Okay, now I know we've got little time, so we better plough straight in. Can I ask you if you could just explain one thing, just at the beginning, because we keep referring to the twin tracks here, the Kyoto Protocol and what some countries want. What is the other track? There seems to be a lot of confusion for people who are not following it all very, very closely. There are two tracks, and where do they meet or don't they meet?
I mean, that's the biggest argument right now, if they are to meet or whether they should meet at all. And the preference from developing countries as a bloc actually is that they shouldn't meet, at least not in Copenhagen. And you ask about the other track. It is something that came out of the Bali conference. Some people would have heard of the Bali Action Plan. I would call it the Bali Consensus, which is really that while you have the Kyoto Protocol track discussions and negotiations carrying on to come out with a second commitment period for the Kyoto Protocol, the Bali track or the convention track is actually something which was specially set up to enhance the implementation of the convention and the gaps in implementing that in terms of provision of finance, technology support, and capacity building to developing countries. And obviously, how you can engage the US and ensure that the US, who is not a signatory to the Kyoto Protocol, has also a legally binding framework to ensure that it has comparable mitigation targets or effort as other parties who are part of the Kyoto Protocol track. Yeah.
So at some point, if the US is to be part of tackling climate change, which it surely must, sooner or later, these tracks will come together, presumably, somehow, not necessarily here, but at some point.
Well, some point in the distant future, actually. That's what you hear from developing countries as a bloc. They're saying, out of Copenhagen, you need to have an agreement in Copenhagen that has, on the one hand, an amended Kyoto Protocol, and on the other hand, an agreement for how to deal with the US and how to engage other developing countries like China and India into the global mitigation effort, and also addressing adaptation and other needs like reduced emissions from deforestation. So the tracks, at least in Copenhagen, will not come together. You will have a Copenhagen outcome with two distinct and inseparable, but actually in a sense linked to some extent outcomes. One is the Kyoto Protocol, and the other is an outcome that addresses the US and how you deal with developing countries and support them also.
Okay, so we've had a week and a day or so. We're coming up to intense negotiations. Ministers, prime ministers, presidents are coming to cross the T's and dot the I's. We've had a few alarms and excursions with the small island states asking for 1.5 degrees rather than 2 degrees as average global rise, leaked Danish letter. So what now in this remaining of the rest of the week are you hoping for that would see a satisfactory conclusion? What are you sort of keeping an eye on?
Well, I'm keeping an eye on the overall level of ambition of the outcome in Copenhagen. I mean, we need to remind ourselves always that we're here to get an agreement that will effectively reduce emissions while at the same time not undermining the right to development of poor and vulnerable communities. So that's what we'll be looking out for. When leaders come, we're asking them not to be afraid to take the necessary decisions, and we're particularly focusing on developed country leaders who should be coming with mitigation offers and targets on the table, as well as financing. And we have then a comprehensive package that will lead to the outcome that will mean that we're still on track to keep temperature increase well below 2 degrees, not to mention the 1.5 that AOCs and Africa recently has also come out asking for. So those are the key things we want to see come out of Copenhagen. We want to see that the legal architecture, that is the Kyoto Protocol track, isn't undermined. We have an outcome that maintains that with a second commitment period, including adequate mitigation targets to developed countries, and also we want to see the US also committing to reducing its emissions under the LCA or the convention track, and also developing countries then being enabled and supported to join in the global fight against climate change and also adapting to climate change. So that's what we want to see coming out of Copenhagen, and we'll be watching that very closely.
But not a lot to go on at the moment, not a lot to be optimistic about. And today there was a report of a leaked Canadian document which suggests that the Canadian government is secretly sort of pushing a program where their emissions will be, it's alleged, 3 times higher than they were suggesting. So that's not very good news if it's true. And is there any good news in terms of emissions reductions to seize on, or do you think that's something that might not come out till the end, the last day, the last evening even of the talks?
I mean, there are a number of crunch issues which people are saying will and should be resolved when the leaders come here. We can take those sort of decisions that are necessary. And I think the scale of emission reduction targets is one of those issues. And for example, we've got, if you're looking at the EU, for example, the EU could potentially be able to move to 30% emission reduction targets today if it wanted to, or definitely before the end of the conference. So on that level, we can see the EU moving. We're hoping that other developed countries, Australia, Japan, Russia, Canada, and even the US will come with much more ambitious numbers, which are slightly, if not a lot higher than what is already being mentioned by them in the process. So but I'm not terribly optimistic that they will come and do that, because it is a very, I think, self-interest driven process where you have these countries wanting to come and offer the list and get the most out of the process by expecting developing countries to do much more than it is their fair share. So I think you need to find a way of balancing that. But then we hope that since the world is watching what is happening here, and that you have all this pressure and mobilization, and leaders also coming. Now, I mean, we hear 120 will be coming out today and tomorrow. Some are already here. We hope that they're coming with hard commitments, firm, concrete commitments in their briefcases and pockets, else it would have been a wasted trip. So we expect that they're coming here to take serious decisions. Yeah.
Well, you do hear this phrase, we hope that, quite a lot here. I mean, what happens if they don't? Would it fizzle out? Would it just be a sort of nominal statement that we're going to carry on earnestly trying to do our best? But I mean, what is it if they don't make serious reductions?
I mean, they're going to try to lock in the offers and proposals on the table already. While this is a step in the right direction, if you want to look at what is on offer right now, it is nowhere close to where we need to be. And also the problem of climate change isn't just going to go away. So it's not something that you can sweep under the carpet and forget about that. You have to look at it. And I don't think that an inadequate outcome from Copenhagen will mean that they're off the hook. We are going to be campaigning, we're going to be putting pressure for everything to be put back on the table and revisited, and the level of ambition to be increased. But now we're talking about the post-Copenhagen phase. We're here in Copenhagen. I still do believe we have the opportunity to get the best out of the leaders who come. And over the next 3 days, that will be the focus, to ensure that they increase the level of the ambition, both in terms of the mitigation targets on the table, but also the financial, technological, and capacity building support that developed parties are ready to offer. And also then to encourage and incentivize developing countries, particularly emerging economies, to join in that effort and contribute to the global emission reductions goal. Yeah.